Hello, everybody. Welcome to Ham Radio University 2022 once again, and to the Ham Radio Contesting Forum. I'm Mel Granick, KS2G. I'll be your genial host to tell you, quote, everything you need to know about ham radio contesting. So I appreciate you being here. We got a lot to do. I'm going to go through this pretty much at light speed, and just to remind you that this presentation, a recording of the presentation, the slide deck will be on the Ham Radio University website at a later date. Just a quick word about our founder, Phil Lewis, N2MUN, my good friend, who originated the Ham Radio University concept 23 years ago. The idea being to provide an educational conference for ham radio operators, particularly those who had been inactive for a long period of time, those who are looking for the opportunity to try out a new aspect of amateur radio. Phil was a great friend, a great help in doing these forums, and we miss him quite a lot. And we hold Ham Radio University going forward in his memory, and he is our honorary chairman going forward. So quick poll. If George would put this up to me, I want to find out what you know about contesting. George, do it. All right, I see the poll is up. Just use your mouse and click on the choices. Have you never operated a contest? You do it every now and then, or you operate contests a lot? So I have some idea of what your level of experience is. George will give me the result in just a minute.
Most people have voted. We'll just wait another few seconds.
Okay, so we've got a lot of newbies. What is it? What does that say? 34% newbies, and quite a few who are, I'll call you casual contest operators. So that's good. And a couple of folks who operate a lot, and we hope we can provide useful information for everybody who's at whatever level of contesting experience you have. So. Just a note, since this is a sort of worldwide forum, we have some people who've checked in from outside the United States. Any references I make to licensing, band plans, or regulatory information, of course, that's applicable only to U.S. licensees. Your requirements and so forth may be different outside the United States if you're not under the jurisdiction of the FCC. So to begin with, what the heck is contesting in the first place? Well, it's also known as radio sport. It's basically competitive amateur radio operating. And what that means is you try to work as many stations as possible in as many places as possible as quickly as possible. There are lots of different contests, dozens of formats and so forth, but they all come down to this basic format. As many stations as possible, in many places as possible, as fast as you can. So how popular is contesting? Well, here's a look at the growth in contesting between 1996 and 2010. This is a graph of the number of logs that were submitted to the Big Five contests during that period of time, 1996 to 1910. And you can see the steady growth in the number of logs submitted during that period from, something around 18,000 all the way up to about 50,000 growth in that time period. But what's happened since then, from between 2010 and now? Well, I don't have the intervening years, but I do have the last few years for a single contest, the CQ Worldwide DX contest, which by any measure is the most popular contest in the world. And as you can see in recent years, the range of the number of logs submitted between the two contests is anywhere from 15 to now about 18,000. So again, back here, all five contests had only 50,000 logs, right? And now just the CQ Worldwide contest has nearly 20,000 logs. So you can see that contesting is a really popular ham radio activity. So what class of license do you need to be a contester? Well, any class of license. All amateur radio licensees in the United States can participate in contests. Novices and technicians, which have limited HF operating privileges can operate in VHF and UHF contests. They can operate HF phone on 10 meters between 28.3 and 28.5 megahertz. Novices techs can operate in Ridian data on 10 meters between 28.0 and 28.3. So there are contests that you can operate on 10-meter phone and 10-meter digital. And of course, on CW, novices and techs have CW privileges on 80, 40, and 15 meters for CW contests. So anybody with any class of license can be a contester. So how do you find out when the contests are on? Well, Bruce Horn, WA7BML, has a handy dandy contest calendar. It's at the URL contestcalendar.com. You go to the website and you'll find this list of contest calendars, the current 8-day calendar, 12-month calendar, perpetual calendar, calendars divided by mode and so forth. And if you go to Bruce's website, which he does a great job keeping up to date, you can click on any particular contest. You see the date that it's on, you can click on it, find out information on it, the website that gives you the rules and so forth. So contestingcalendar.com, very easy to remember. So once you go to contestingcalendar.com, what do you do first? Well, you want to decide which contests to operate. And there are many different kinds. There are HF contests and there are contests on VHF and UHF. There are small contests, there are short contests. There are contests as short as a few hours or just a day. But there are long contests that go for an entire weekend, a whole 48-hour contest period. There are contests just for stateside, domestic contests in the United States. And there are domestic contests for overseas operators as well that operate only within their own country or DXCC entity. Or there are worldwide DX contests where stations work DX contests. So there are DX contests, for example, the ARRL DX contest, where people outside the United States, ops outside the United States, all try to work US operators. Or there are contests like the CQ Worldwide DX contest I cited earlier, where everybody works everybody. There are contests that are only for CW. There are contests that are only for phone. There are contests that are just for RIDI or RIDI and digital, and there are mix and match contests. There are some contests where there are you can operate one or more or both modes. So there's something for everybody. HF, small, large, domestic, CW, phone, whatever. There are lots of contests. So you decide which kind you want. So if you say there are dozens of contests, as I said earlier, how do I find out how they all work? Well, each contest has a set of rules. The rules explain the dates and times of operation of the contest, usually indicated in UTC. The rules explain what band or bands the contest is operating on and what modes the contest is operating in. The objectives of the contest, and that explains what kind of stations to work. The contest exchange, and I will explain that in just a second. The entry classes, this is important because it's, I have a modest station. I have a 100-watt radio transceiver. I have a 3-element tri-bander on my roof up about 35 feet. That's about 10 meters for those of you who are outside the United States. And I'm not a big gun. I don't have a big signal. But there are entry classes that let me operate and compete against only other low power stations. So there are entry classes for high power and low power and for QRP. And there are entry classes for different types of antenna systems. Some contests have a subclass as one I operate in, which is only for stations that operate with a single tri-bander and wire antennas. So there are different entry classes, and you can pick your class so that you're competing on a level playing field against stations that are similar to yours. The rules explain how to score the contest and how to submit a log. Now, log submission is how you enter a contest, right? There's no form to fill out. There's nothing about that. You don't have to decide in advance. You operate the contest. If you want to enter, you send in your log, and I'll explain how you do that in just a minute. So let's talk about a contest exchange. What are all those numbers? So each contest consists of an exchange of information. The exchange is defined in the rules, and it may be something you give the other station your name and state. I would say Mel in New York. Signal report and QSO number, which is you start with QSO number 1 and next QSO is number 2, et cetera, et cetera. Signal report and QSO number. Signal report and the IARU or CQ zone you're in. IARU and CQ have different zone systems. I'm in IARU 8 and CQ zone 5 in the East Coast of the United States. Signal report in the grid square if you're in a VHF UHF contest. Now you must receive and accurately log the exchange for the QSO to be valid. That's what determines whether you get the points for the QSO that you just had. So something that inevitably comes up from you newbies out there, you're going to hear, no matter what the actual signal is like, everyone gives and seems to expect in return a 59599 signal report. So you'll hear an exchange that sounds something like, I'll hear a station and say W2XYZ, very weak, say again. W2XYZ. I got the XYZ. What's your name again? What's your name? And I finally get it and I say, okay, fine, you're 5'9" in New York. Now, why is that? Well, that's because the contest signal report, unlike a casual QSO, is not intended to convey information about the quality of the signal. The signal reports are just part of the exchange. The rules usually state the exchange is a signal report, and it doesn't say it has to be an actual signal report, an accurate signal report, what you're really hearing, just the signal report. So the convention is you use 5.9, it's one less piece of information to actually copy, and it speeds up the QSOs in the contest. In CW, 599 can be shortened to 5NN. It's fewer elements in the character. Those are what are known as cut numbers. You'll see in CW contests, there are a lot of abbreviations like that that are used to speed things along. So remember, those of you who are newcomers to contesting, no matter how weak the signal is, the guy on the other end, if you make the contact, he's 5'9". Sweepstakes, a very popular contest, that has the longest exchange of any contest exchange, and it corresponds to the heading on an NTS radiogram. Those of you who are in the United States and operate sweepstakes, you give your number, precedence, which is the power you're running, your call sign, the year you were licensed, and your section, and it corresponds to this heading on the on a radiogram, as you can see. And that's where the history of the ARRL sweepstakes exchange comes from. So having said all that, the question is, what band should I work and which stations should I spend a lot of time, not spend a lot of time? Should I call CQ? Should I answer CQs? Well, in the immortal words of the late, great Beatle George Harrison, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. You can do whatever you want. Random operating can be a lot of fun. My opinion is it's much better to have goals, strategies, and tactics. The goal, what's the objective of your contest operation? And then the strategy, what's your plan for accomplishing the goal that you've set for yourself? And what are your tactics? What's the procedure or maneuvers you're going to use to implement your plan? Goals, strategy, tactics. Goals. Okay, what's your objective? Are you going for the highest possible score you can? Are you just going for 100, QSOs? Well, I do this very often on contests. As I said, I'm not a big gun. I'm not going to win a big DX contest. I may go in and say, well, I'm in it for 100 QSOs. Or I'm looking for particular multipliers. I'm in sweepstakes because I want to get a clean sweep. I want to get all the sections. Or I'm looking for new countries on my DXCC list. Or I'm trying to complete worked all states on a particular band. So I'm just going in there for states. Or I'm looking for prefixes because I'm trying to fill out the WPX order. I'm going for grid squares. Or maybe I'm just going in there to have some fun. Maybe I'm just going to randomly make a few QSOs and make some people happy because I'm in New York State and they need New York State as a multiplier, whatever. So your objective can be anything that you want. But what's your plan? Again, as I said, you can enter as a single operator, or you're going to team up with someone else and be a multi-operator. You're going to operate just a single band in an all-band contest, or you're going to operate multiple bands. You're going to operate all the modes or just one mode. Are you going to operate assisted? Are you going to use a spotting network, as they call it, or assisted or unlimited category? And what's your power level? I don't own an amplifier. I'm always low power, 100 watts. Man, maybe I want to turn my radio down and operate as QRP. Not likely for me, but some people will do that. And then how many hours do you want to put in? What times a day you're going to operate? How does the contest period fit into your real life? I mean, you're going to take time off. We go out for dinner every Saturday night with relatives. So if I'm operating a contest, I got to know that I'm going to have to carve out time to go out to dinner Saturday night during the contest period. So that's what my plan is. And what's the tactics? Well, there's really only two you can run. That means you can call CQ and hope stations come back to you. Easier to do if you have a big station, lots of power, lots of antennas. You can search and pounce. You can tune the band and find stations that you can hear and that you can call in return. Tactically, you can also think about what band you're on and what mode you're on and whether you can switch. If you're in a multi-band contest, the question is, okay, you start out on 20 meters, and should you go down to 40 meters or should you switch up to 15 meters? And that's determined by QSO rates, how many contacts you're making per hour and that kind of thing. And the value of multipliers, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. Is it worthwhile for you to look for multipliers? That can be part of your tactical approach to the contest that you're on. And then there's, what times of day you're going to be on, and this depends on whether you're in a domestic contest or whether you're in a DX contest. And for a DX contest, think about on-off times and working the gray line. Gray line is good for to consider propagation in terms of that. How do you know which band to use? Oh, well, you can take a look at a real-time website like DX Maps has this real-time website that shows you what QSOs are going on worldwide at any particular point in time. So if you're in a contest and the contest, like in this graph, shows you that if you need South Africa down at the bottom of the continent, no QSOs going on there at the moment, likely no propagation, not a good idea to be searching for QSOs with South Africa. As I said, you can work the gray line. Interesting propagation characteristics occur when you work the gray line. If you want a good explanation of gray line propagation, go to your Google or favorite other website search engine and just type in working the gray line, and you'll find a really great article by Paul Harden, NA5N, that explains gray line propagation. Now, a moment ago, I mentioned multipliers. So what are multipliers? Well, as set forth in the contest rules, each contact you make, each QSO is worth a certain number of points. And the total number of points is then multiplied by the number of QSOs that meet certain criteria. Those criteria may be particular number of states, provinces, or counties, something like that, or the number of ARRL sections, as is the case with sweepstakes, or the number of DXCC entities in DX contests, or the number of CQ or IARU zones, as is in the case with the CQ contests and with the IARU-HF contest, right? Or the number of grid squares that you contact in a VHF-UHF contact. Here's why multipliers are important. Multipliers are what make contests interesting, and the multipliers are what create the need for the strategy that I pointed out to you earlier. See, without multipliers, every contest would be a simple competition to see who can make the most contacts. And that's not very challenging because, again, big gun stations can make more contacts than little pistols like me. But with multipliers, it's possible for one station to have fewer QSOs but outscore another station. How does this work? Okay, let's take a look at the way multipliers work in the ARRL 10-meter contest, which just concluded last month in December for single sideband. QSOs in this contest count 2 points each on phone. The multipliers are the number of contacts you make that are different US and Mexican states, Canadian provinces, and DXCC entities. So the way you compute your score in this contest is you take the number of QSOs and you multiply by 2 points per QSO. That gives you QSO points. Then you multiply the QSO points by the number of multipliers, different US states, Mexican states, provinces, et cetera, and that gives you your total score. So here's how multipliers can make that difference I was talking about just a second ago. Station A works 200 QSOs. 100 of those QSOs are unique states, provinces, and DXCC entities. So 200 QSOs times 2 points is 400 QSO points, and 400 QSO points times 100 mults is 40,000 points. This, by the way, shows you why when you look at contest scores, the numbers are so huge because of points and multipliers. Now let's look at Station B. Station B works only 175 QSOs, but 125 of them are unique states, provinces, and DXCC entities. So 175 contacts times 2 points each is 350 QSO points. That's still behind Station A, but 350 QSO points times 125 multipliers is 43,750 points. So Station B has worked 25 fewer QSOs, but beats Station A by 3,750 points. So this is why multipliers are a thing in contests. Multipliers can make a really big difference. Going back to ancient history in the year 2001 in the 10-meter contest, here is a look at the single op low power sideband claimed scores in that contest, the number 10, 11, 12, and 13 claimed scores. You will notice that W8DD and yours truly, KS2G, each worked 1,122 QSOs, exactly the same number. But DD worked 139 mults, and I only worked 124 mults. So W8DD beat me by 33,660 points. To make that up without any multipliers, I would have needed 136 more QSOs. And look down this list, you'll notice that both of us had higher scores than KB7XL, who had more QSOs than we did, and KE50G, who had a lot more QSOs than we did, because he only had 108 multipliers. So multipliers are a thing in contesting. So let's talk a little bit about scoring in contests. And the question I've seen asked, does any just good old boy have a chance to be a top scoring contester? Well, to finish in the top 10 in a big contest in your category, if you choose the right category, you don't need big antennas up really high, and you don't need a kilowatt linear amplifier. And you don't really even need a late model top of the line transceiver with a DSP and memories and dual watch and a scope and all that kind of thing. In picking out your strategy, in deciding on your category and how you're going to operate, smarts and tenacity count more than hardware. As I said, I have a 100-watt transceiver. I have a 3-element Yagi. It's up 35 feet, it's 10 meters high. It's on the roof of my house. And yet I have been fortunate enough to win a lot of certificates. Here's one where I was 10th place in the United States in the International DX contests a few years ago. Division leader in the Hudson Division and 10th place in the United States. In the CQ Worldwide contest, second high in my division. If you've got the right strategy, enter the right category, you can have a lot of wallpaper. With the right strategy, putting in more hours yields higher results than putting out more watts. So you're going to operate a contest. Now you go to the contestingcalendar.com website, you look at the contest, and you download the rules and regulations, and you want to set up a contest log. So what goes into a contest log contact? Well, obviously the date and time, and you should always log in UTC, Zulu time, so-called. Back when I made this slide up years ago, I would tell people, check your computer clock against WWV. These days, you can check your computer clock against a number of very accurate websites. I use one called time.is, time.is. And make sure that your computer clock is set to confirm the offset time from local times, and you're set for UTC. Okay, so put in the date and time, you put in the band you're operating on. Does not usually necessarily have to be the precise frequency, just the band you're on. I'm on 20 meters, 15 meters, or put it down as 14 megahertz or 21 megahertz or whatever. And then you want the contest exchange, which I explained just before. And then the log will give you the points, multipliers, and the score. So the contest information is date and time, the band you're on, and the contest exchange. And when you use software, which I'll explain in a minute, it'll give you points, multipliers, and score. Okay. So the question is, do you have to use a computer in the first place? Back when I started contesting, everything was done by hand. I've been contesting for about 45 years. And so by hand, there's a lot to have. You had to have a paper log, and then you had to have what they call the dupe sheet, because most contests only allow you to operate a station, another station, once, either per contest or once per band or per mode. So you had to have a sheet where you could keep track of the stations that you worked, so that you didn't work a station more than once. And then to keep track of those mults that I talked about, because multipliers are a thing, you had to have a multiplier list to look at and check off. And then if prefixes were a multiplier, then you needed a list of prefixes to check off. Or, as a multiplier, maybe you needed a zone or a grid map. And then usually wanted a scratch pad to write down stations that you were trying to work but hadn't reached yet, and so forth. And when you wanted to total up your score, you needed a calculator to figure this all out, and then you had to fill out a summary sheet. So obviously there was a lot to do when you logged on paper. So the solution to this is obviously to log with a computer. Now, using a computer, you generally, in contesting, use specialized contesting software. The most popular such software is the N1MM Plus Logger. This is a Windows program, and it's free. And it's probably the best program out there. Some might dispute that and say the one just below it, WriteLog, is a better program, but WriteLog is a commercial program, and you pay for it. N1MM Plus is by far the most popular specialized contesting software that's out there right now. The guys who are behind it are wonderful. They don't charge for it. They update it like every 10 minutes, it seems. Every time I open it up, it asks me if I want the latest update. They're very responsive to changes in the contesting scene, new contest, rules changes, so forth. N1MM Plus Logger for Windows would be my recommendation. But there are others. WriteLog is very popular. WinTest is another one very popular, also commercial. On the Mac and Linux side, I can't attest to any of these. I'm not a Mac or a Linux guy, but there are Mac and Linux specialized contesting software as well, as you can see here. So what does contesting software do? Well, again, it logs your contacts. It checks for dupes. It tallies your multipliers, keeps track of those for you. It calculates a running score so you can see how you're doing. It tracks the rate you're doing, how many QSOs you're making in any fixed period of time, QSOs per hour, QSOs in the last, 10 minutes, and so forth. It monitors the spotting network if you're using the spotting network for assisted or so-called unlimited operation. It lets you look at that, and if you see things on the spotting network, it lets you with a mouse click, tune to the frequency where the spot is located, and so forth. It usually has a module in it which can serve as a voice or CW memory keyer. I'll talk about that in just a minute. If it's a digital or RIDI contest, the software usually has a built-in or a link to RIDI or digital interface. It'll control the radios and antennas with the right interfaces. N1MM plugs into most modern radios and lets you tune the radio to specific frequencies or do band changes and so forth by clicking on links in the software itself, and rather than having to tune your radio to do that. When the contest is over, the software will summarize and analyze your results, and it'll generate what's known as a Cabrillo file for log submission. This is the format of the contest log that you'll use to send into the contest sponsor, and by submitting a log, that's how you enter the contest. And then many programs will help you print your QSLs. N1MM does not have such a module. It staunchly refuses to include one for whatever reasons, but you can find add-ons to N1MM that will let you put your N1MM logs into a third-party program to print QSL cards. Now, back to the original question, do you have to use a computer? These days, for most contests, the answer is yes. If you log by hand, most contests will ask you to go to a website and transcribe your hand-printed log into an online log for submission. There's still some contests that will accept hand-printed logs, but there are not many of them left. So these days, it's advisable to use contesting software. And with all these advantages I've cited to you, why would you not? So besides logging and what I just talked about, how can the contest software help you? Well, it'll show you which band to work when based on the activity that's available on each band. It'll help you find stations and multipliers to work. It'll help you monitor and increase your QSO rate, and therefore increase your QSO total and therefore your mult totals. And it will decrease or eliminate duplicate contacts, which don't do any good in the contest. So the logging software does a lot for you. And as I said, these days you want to go with logging software. Now, how about there are a lot of newbies out there. We saw in the poll setting up a new station for contesting. What would the items be that you need for contesting? Well, as I said, any operator can be a contest operator, so any station can be a contest station. Basically, all you need is a transceiver these days, or back in the day, separate transmitter and receiver. You need an antenna, obviously, to get your signal out. You don't need a linear amplifier because, as I said, there are contest categories for low power and QRP fleet power, and so you don't need an amplifier. If you're going to operate phone, you need a microphone. If you're going to operate CW, you need a straight key or a CW keyer. If you're going to operate RIDI or digital, you need a digital interface. Now, how do you optimize that, right? I said you got all these things, but how do you set them up, and what's the optimum way to set up your station? And again, contesting, you're going to spend some long hours, so the most important pieces of equipment in a contest shack are non-electronic. They're your chair and your desk, because you need ergonomics, not economics, ergonomics, because you want to be comfortable while you're operating. You want, just like long hours at your computer, if you do that for work, you want to have long hours at your radio and computer and so forth, and you don't want to end up with carpal tunnel syndrome because the desk and the keyboard and the mouse are in the wrong place. And you don't want to end up with back trouble because you're using a lousy chair that's not adjusted properly, and you don't want to end up with neck trouble because you're hunched over looking at your laptop or your computer monitor. Likewise, if you're using one of these big, 27-inch monitors hanging on the wall, you don't want to get neck trouble because you're craning your neck to see it. You want to set your station up ergonomically. Most important consideration in station layout is ease of use. You want to be able to see and reach all of the devices, displays, and controls you need most often, and perform required functions with a minimum of movement. You don't have to want to be constantly moving around and stretching out and turning around and so on and so forth. I rearranged my station a number of years ago, and it's pretty good ergonomically, except for one thing. The rotator control box, there was no room for it sort of in front of me. It's behind me and to my right, and I have to sort of reach out over here to get to it, or turn my chair all the way around like this. Not the greatest use, but I'm limited by what I've got available. So to that end, some useful accessories for contesters. A CW memory keyer, because if you're going to be calling CQ constantly, It's nice to be able to just push a button and send it automatically rather than having to tap it out by yourself. Likewise, the contest exchange to be stored in a CW memory keyer. A boom microphone or a boom mic headset, as I said, so that you can move around without having to worry about being in front of your microphone. A foot switch. I'm not a big Vox fan. A lot of contesters like to use Vox. I like to use a foot switch because I think it gives me better control over my transmit and receive. And like a CW memory keyer, an audio voice keyer can record your CQs and record the contest exchange, and likewise. Now, it's interesting to note that a couple of these things are now built into most current radios. Most radios, I think, uh, these days have a built-in CW keyer, very common, and an awful lot of them have a voice keyer built into them. So back in the day when these were outboard accessories, nowadays they all be inside the box in your radio. So not an operating consideration, but also when you set up your desk, where you put it in your room, and this goes not only for contest stations, but stations in general, because, and particularly in a contest, if something goes wrong and you want to be able to get behind the desk, you want to be able to just walk behind it and deal with the occasional problem of cables getting disconnected or tangled or whatever. Now, here are some questions posted in ham radio forums. By the way, if you have questions, I think we're going to have time to answer questions. If you go to your chat box, there's a box you can open up and type in questions and send those questions to my moderator, George, and to GA if you haven't already done that. But here are some questions that have been posted in ham radio online forums. And the question arises, is it acceptable for a non-contest station to respond to CQ contest calls? And the answer is absolutely. Contest stations, as I said, are trying to work as many contacts as possible. Every QSO counts. You don't have to be, quote, in the contest, which means you don't have to submit a log. You just have to provide the contest exchange information to be a valid QSO. But one thing before I get to the next question, well, it's relative to the next question. Am I wasting that station's time because my QSO is not verifiable? It's not required that you be in the contest to provide a valid QSO. You don't have to submit a log. But if you're going to casually operate and not submit a log, make a handful of QSOs. Make 3, 4, or 5 QSOs rather than just one. The reason for that is when they review contest logs and they find your call sign in only one log, it doesn't show up in anybody else's log, they may assume that the station that has your QSO in that log just miscopied your call sign, that you're a unique, that no one else worked you. So that for that station, probably that call sign probably is incorrect. So if you're going to casually operate, not be in the contest, not turn in a log, work a handful of QSOs, 5, 6, 7, 8 QSOs, so that you show up in more than one log. Now, state QSO parties are very popular forms of contesting. So you'll hear QSO parties announcing a particular state. The New York State QSO party, which ran this past October, are stations in the New York State QSO party looking only for replies from New York State? No, looking for contacts from both within the state and stations elsewhere. Out-of-state stations can also enter the contest, submit a log, and receive awards. In most QSO parties, the in-state stations have different categories than the out-of-state stations, and they get credit for working other stations inside their state and also points for working stations outside their state. Stations outside New York State, for example, in the New York QSO party, they want to work only New York State stations. So if you're an out-of-state station, you can work stations that are in-state, okay? Now, if a foreign station asks for a contact during a state QSO party, will the New York station reply? Or would that be rude on my part if you're a DX station? Yeah, they'll reply, not rude, same as above. They get credit for a contact outside of their state. So you can be a DX station, don't have to be in any particular state. You can be just an out-of-state station. Multiple contests. Okay, if two contests are going on at the same time, can you operate both of them? And if you look at the contest calendar, you'll see that there are multiple contests running on practically every weekend. So what's the solution to this? Well, yeah, you can work, you can enter both contests. You can operate in both of them. Just ask for and provide the exchange information for both events, but you have to keep separate logs so that you send in the right log for the correct contest that you're operating. Now, if I enter a contest on all bands, do I go back to serial number one when I change to a different band? No, the serial number continues across all bands, but you may or may not be able to work the same station or multiplier on more than one band. That depends on the contest rules. I mentioned duplicate contacts before. Give me 1 second here. My post-nasal drip. Should I work dupe stations? Well, this is a matter of opinion and great debate within the contest community. Some people think it's working dupe wastes too much time. Some people say it's quicker to work them rather than tell them they're a dupe. There's no penalty for dupes in your log, so why not? Now, it helps the other station who may have busted your call. And I've had this happen to me. I'll work a station and the station will say, you're a dupe. And I'll say, you're not in my log. So work me again. Now, if there's time, the other station may be able to tell you when you work. They may be able, if they're using a computer program, they may be able to tell you the time, the date and time that you worked. I can go back to my log and see that I got their call wrong or something like that. But otherwise, it's just quicker to say, work me again. There's no penalty for the station working me again to have the dupe, but I get credit for the QSO and the busted QSO doesn't count. Now, should you remove dupe contacts from your log? And the answer is no. Once they're logged, you leave them in, there's no penalty, and the log should reflect what you actually worked during the contest. And again, it helps the other station who may have busted your call. QSLing, proper, good idea, worth it to send QSL cards for contacts? Absolutely. Contests are the best way to get the contacts you needed for various awards. Make sure it's easy for contest stations to QSL. Contest stations work lots of stations. If it's a stateside station and you're in the United States, send stateside cards with an SASE, self-addressed stamped envelope. That way, if I get your card, I don't have to find an envelope. I don't have to find the stamp. I don't have to buy a stamp. I just put my card inside your SASE and send it back to you. For DX cards that are direct, send them green stamps, send them dollar bills or values of the dollar. If you send DX cards with green stamps or anything else, if you send cards direct to a DX station, don't put any indication on the envelope that they're a ham radio operator. Don't put their call sign, anything like that. Just put their name and address. There are many countries around the world where it's unfortunate but true that postal workers understand that there are green stamps inside ham radio letters, and they will open them up and steal them and throw away the QSL cards. The best thing to do is use Logbook of the World, LOTW, and or Club Log for DX QSLs and contesting, and EQSL, QSL.com, they're not as popular among contesters. You can use QSL bureaus if you don't mind waiting. That takes a long time. The ARRL has an outgoing QSL bureau for members, and stateside, each of the 10 call districts have a incoming DX card bureau, which you can use for that, but it takes a long time. I get the bureau cards from stations overseas who want my QSL that go back literally 1 or 2 years sometimes. It can take a long time using the QSL bureau. So where can you get information about contesting? Well, on paper, there's contesting information every month in QST magazine and on the ARRL website. The National Contest Journal is a companion publication that you can subscribe to on paper, or if you're an ARRL member, you can access it online. And CQ Magazine, which actually sponsors some of the big contests, as I mentioned, the CQ Worldwide contest. CQ Magazine is another place to get it on paper. Online, lots of resources. ARRL website contesting. I mentioned Bruce Horn's contest calendar. There's a very good amateur radio contesting FAQ on QSL.net. KA9FOX has a contest and DX library. You can Google that and get the URL that I have here if you can't scribble it down. Contesting.com is a good website for that, and the K9JY contesting tips. Again, I would suggest you just scribble down K9JY contesting tips, and it will take you to that URL. Now, what contests are coming up if you want to get going? Well, we're in the middle of one right now. This weekend, January 8th, 9th, is the ARRL RIDI Roundup contest. It runs for the entire 48 hours. When you get through with Ham Radio University later on this afternoon, you can turn on your radio and you can operate the RIDI Roundup. Coming up next weekend is the North American QSO Party CW. The NAQPs are nice contests to get going, particularly for newbies. They're pretty casual. They're only 12 hours long. Saturday afternoon into Saturday night Eastern time, and they're pretty low key. So they're a good place to get on. On the 22nd, there's the North American QSO Party, a single sideband version of that. So if you're a newbie or you don't operate contests too often, the NAQP contests are pretty nice places to start out. Looking at February the 12th and 13th, CQ Worldwide WPX RIDI contest. That's a big one. WPX stands for multipliers. The multipliers in that contest are call sign multipliers. On the 26th is the NAQP RIDI contest, and then in the beginning of March is the ARRL DX SSB contest. So that about does it for me. I'll just remind you this slide deck and a link to a recording of this presentation will be posted on the HRU website. If you have questions that we're unable to answer in the few minutes left here, you can email me directly at KS2G@ARRL.net. And if you're having a good time and enjoying HRU, I would urge you to make a small donation. HRU is free to attend. It always has been in person. It has been last year and this online, but there are some expenses that we do have to cover, and we would appreciate a donation if you can see yourself clear to give us $5 or even more. And you can donate with a button that appears on the hamradiouniversity.org website. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope we've given you some good information on contesting. George, I see we have a few minutes left. Do we have any questions?
We don't have any questions, but if anyone has a question, they can open their questions tab on their control panel, click on a little arrow in front of the word questions, and you can type in a question.
Okay, and I would just go back and put up this slide here, so if people want to copy down some of these URLs, you can do that while we're waiting to see if anybody else has any questions.
I still don't see any questions, Mel. Ah, here we go. Is there a penalty for dupes? So here's a good question.
No, as I said, there's no penalty for dupes. They don't count for any points, but there's no penalty in there may be some exception to this in some arcane contest that I'm not aware of, but when you log a dupe, there's no penalty for it. You get no points for it. It's worth nothing. So that's why I say some people say you just work them and don't worry about it, rather than say you're a dupe and the other guy on phone will say no, you're not my log, and back and forth and back. And you just work them the second time and be done with it. Anything else, George?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. Well, again, I want to thank everybody for taking time to attend this. And again, I'll remind you that if you have any questions after the fact, after you've thought about what we discussed here, send me an email, ks2g@ARRL.net. The slide deck and a link to the recording of this presentation will be posted on the HRU website. And if you can see a way clear to help support HRU with a donation, go to the hamradiouniversity.org website, click on the donate button and send us a few bucks to keep this going. I think we can close it, George. Thanks so much. 73, everybody. I hope you enjoy the rest of HRU.